Hey friends, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here this week for my conversation with Ian Dunaway. Ian has been in ministry for 21 years and has served many churches in many ways. He's currently the director of ministry development with G6 Allies and the creator of Shaping Student Ministry, the student ministry offshoot of G6. Through his ministry with G6, Ian has been able to minister and love on pastoral families all over and support them through the trials ministry often brings. Ian's a husband, a father, and a dear friend, and I'm so excited to share our conversation with you. On the show, we chat about everything from the Bible Project to the nature of miracles, what's it like to wrestle with hard ideas on our faith journey, the nature of doubt, and so much more. I hope you learned something new this week and the conversation is an encouragement to you. Be sure to follow the show so you never miss an episode. Grab some tea or coffee, turn up the volume, and enjoy. Let's talk. Ireland.
My
And I'm
sister
excited to go to
lived there.
Scotland with Ben because I get to share Scotland with him because I've been and he hasn't. So we're.
Have you been to Edinburgh?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
If I always have said, if I ever moved abroad, that is the city I would live in. Of all the cities I've been to,
beautiful.
it is wonderful.
I love Edinburgh. I love Durham. That's where Mike and Whitney used to live, where we went at one point.
Yep, Durham with the
Then,
cathedral.
yeah.
I have
Then-
a charm on my charm bracelet of Durham Cathedral.
Do you really? It's
Mhm.
one of my faves. But I would love to go to Ireland. I say all that to tease. What's crazy is I would honestly like to go. I don't think it would be much of a trip because I think it'd be underwhelming. But Wales would be a cool place. Largely because it's just a little island, but it's the only Celtic language that's still holding its own. And I had to learn some of it. And I remember very little, but I remember I met a Welsh guy at the SBC when we went with a booth and we started laughing. And I said, I took Welsh in college. I said, I don't remember much. And he said, no. And I said, yeah. I said, Roedden hwn yn y gegin. And he went, well, I was in the kitchen. I said, that's all I know. I just remember that one thing. But it's such all the Celtic languages are so guttural and so broguish to learn and to speak. And they're really interesting. But Wales there's just not a lot of places in the world. Like Wales holds so much importance that when the King of England or a prince will come, they will give their speeches in Welsh. Like they'll teach them what. And so it's just interesting, but nobody speaks Manx. Nobody speaks Cornish. Nobody speaks any of those. And Irish and Gaelic are kind of on the edges, but they're mostly gone. But for some reason, Welsh just sticks. So
That's my problem with the German language. And like I said, my husband's family all speaks German.
yeah.
I don't speak any German. In fact, I took 4 years of French. I really enjoy speaking French. I like the language.
You're fluent in French?
No, I'm not fluent at all, but I remember when I was taking French, the spelling made perfect sense to me at all points in time.
Yeah.
I never had problems with French spelling.
Yeah.
But German is like
Do you know
in your throat all the time. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what are you people saying?
Do you know what's crazy though? You know why German is so hard for you and yet why it's so difficult, at least you probably do, but between languages.
No.
So Hitler Hitler held on hope. So he wanted to invade England, but he held hope for a long time that he could sweet talk the English into joining him because English is a Germanic language. But the crazy thing is that English is a bastardized kind of language because it is German. It's that and Mandarin Chinese are the hardest languages in the world to learn, English and Mandarin.
I've heard Mandarin is very difficult.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's harder than it, but English is so hard because English does not build upon rules or in the way that every other language does. So you really love English is German in base, Latin largely in family and root system, and Greek in root system. And so Greek's like 20 or 30%, Latin is somewhere around 60% or something like that. But the funny thing is German is so hard to understand because it works the same way English does, but with a totally different set of rules. So you're like, that rule doesn't build, that doesn't make sense. Oh my gosh, what does this do? But if you think about it, like in Greek, it's like you think about all your verb it's easy to remember my verbs, just like in Spanish or whatever, but you could do like omai, atai, ometha, esta, antai, and those three things were he, she, it, plurals and singulars. But with us, it's, it's he, you, she, it, them. And you're sitting there going, that doesn't make any sense. It just, that always blew my mind because I took Latin, I took Koine Greek, and I took Spanish. And Spanish was the easiest because it was like Latin. Spanish was the easiest, or like probably a French or Latin. It was easy to see how it was spelled. But what blew my mind when I went and spoke in Russia at a camp was how absolutely SOL I would be when it came to finding my way around a Cyrillic country.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I would just be like, oh, maybe this is a grocery store. It'd be like a mortuary or something. I just wouldn't know. I looked around.
Well, it's kind of like did you ever have you ever studied Hebrew?
No, I mean, I am familiar, with pastor and biblical stuff. I'm familiar with some of it, but not in a way that's too formal.
So I
didn't
decided
have
at one point I wanted to learn Hebrew so I could read the original Hebrew text of things.
How'd that go?
I was using Duolingo, not very far.
You talk about the end of your throat, man.
Well, and it's a completely different kind of alphabet. Like it's not even any similarity in shape or style or like even direction. It reads like it's so completely and utterly foreign. You could look at a word and I'd be like, I have zero inkling. This could mean literally anything. Like literally anything under the sun. This word
Arabic feels that way.
No
Hebrew
idea.
feels that way. It's that. I mean, that because that's kind of how Cyrillic is too, because they're all pushing from east to west, and it's weird. But I had a kid that lived with us for a while. His name was Max. He was one of the kids I met when I went over there, and he lived with us when he was for a couple years. But he spoke Russian, and so he could understand that, and he spoke Hebrew too. So he was a Hebrew guy that was focused on it. But have you ever done a lot with the Bible Project?
No.
Oh man, you should. I think I say that, and then it'll be, they picked the worst name ever for it to be very specific.
I think, isn't the Bible Project the one that has
the videos? Yeah, it's Bible
I was
Project.
thinking of the different translations, but
no. Well, the Bible Project specific, so it's BibleProject.com, but specifically, the guy, there's two guys that pretty much are known for doing it, and they have raised so much money. So almost all of it is free. Talk about Gen Z. Somebody was telling us how immoral it was to charge any kind of money for doing ministry stuff. And I wanted to laugh and go, well, if it's good and it's free, that means somebody paid for it. It just wasn't you. And so anyway, just blows my mind. But all that to say, these guys have raised money because the quality of what they bring to the workplace. And when I had when I was in Louisiana, when I used some of their stuff, because they don't have formal, maybe they do now, but they didn't have formal curriculums. I just used it, but I donate a couple $100 here and there. But it's cool because the guy that runs it has his PhD in Hebrew, and they're both pastors, and they're both, so like some of the most fun stuff. And as a pastor and somebody who's been in seminary and somebody who's been that, like it's crazy how much you have to remember. Cause I hate it that so many guys, they stop learning when they get out of school. Like it's kind of like, well, I'll keep reading some John MacArthur books, or I'll do this, but I don't, I'm good. And there's just so much you'd never know. And so one of the things I loved about it was in Hebrew. I don't know if this is a rabbit hole, so you can stop me if it's annoying, if it's boring, but I think it's really cool. They, so, when you look at just the way that God creates us, like in the beginning, he creates us as the words and the way that it works together is that we're essentially like little idols. We're all idols that point to him. Like we're images of who he is in on earth. Right. And so there's not only this great power and vice regency that he has blessed us with to rule creation under him, but that we reflect who he is. So I think that we hear image and it just gets very esoteric with us. But the truth is, who we've been made to be is a physical representation on earth of who has made us. So not same in power. But the important thing the thing to remember is Eden was a high place. And so Eden was considered a high place where heaven and earth would meet. And so you look at the creatures of heaven, and they're all very specifically ordered and look like different things God has created in order to show how incredible his creation is. What is interesting is in Isaiah 6, when the very famous passage where God shows himself in the temple to Isaiah, and in the year that King Uzziah died, right? I saw before the Lord high and lifted up, he was on a throne, and then we hear that around him the seraphim flew, and they, with two wings they covered their face and their feet, and then with two they flew. And every time that you see those lined up, we always think of them as some type of humanoid thing with six wings. Like, we just don't know how to explain it. The crazy thing is, and this is why I think it's so important on the original language side, is that the word seraph shows up a couple of other times throughout Hebrew, and it was the translators who didn't really know what to do with it, so they kept it transliterated to say seraph or seraphim. But whenever you see that other word, it's a snake.
Huh.
And what's real weird is that we never know what to do with Genesis 3. Like, because people always say, and it's a logical question, if Eve wasn't shocked
Well,
that
when you say don't know what to do with Genesis 3, which part of,
oh,
what do you mean?
yeah, sorry. We don't know this. It seems like a kind of a tertiary thing to worry about, but in Genesis 3, the question is, it seems novel, but I think it's important. Why was Eve not surprised that the snake was talking to her? Like, it just seems odd.
She's just like, okay.
and then you have to ask the question: did animals talk? Did they not? And it opens up this whole thing. Like, this seems like a loose end. And I think that, by the way, I think that God works a lot more. The story of Scripture and history together is much more mythical than we want it to be. I feel like it feels a lot more like Narnia than it probably should in some ways, or Lord of the Rings. And because I just think the way God works is so, and if it doesn't make you and pastors and people, it doesn't make us uncomfortable, it's probably not the way God works. And so it just should challenge what we think. We love to say that God is inexpressible, but then we have 5 points we can express them in very easily. And so anyway, the point is just, it makes a lot of sense that animals have never been able to talk, but that Eve would have spoken with and trusted a creature that she knew could be in the presence of God and was in the presence of God, a seraph, a snake that would fly around him. And that when God curses him, we don't know that snakes have ever had legs. That just seems odd to us, but it makes a lot of sense. The way that he curses this creature, the way that he treats this creature, what happens. But if she saw a creature that she knew in this place where heaven met earth, it's just an interesting connection that they draw between it, that these creatures that serve God look a lot different than what we have. Not even anglicized them, but how much we have tamed them in the last 2,000 years. And so I just thought I think that's a really cool thing, that the Hebrew side of it, that it is a snake and we don't know what to say, but we don't say two snakes flew around Jesus constantly, but Jesus has lions and eagles, and he switches their bodies and heads like, we used to do with Barbies in my sister's, room. And they're just all different looking, and it just is kind of cool. So I don't know.
Well,
but Bible project's worth it.
I think it's difficult for, I would say, particularly Western Christians and especially non-Christians to wrap your head around true miracles.
Yeah.
Because they're not explainable.
Right.
They're entirely outside of the laws and patterns you would have. And there's so many of them in Scripture, right?
Right.
They're all over Scripture, but the one that comes to mind is when the sun moved backwards. It's like, that's not how celestial bodies
when it
work.
stood
That's
still.
not,
yeah.
You're like, that's not how the sun and the moon and the earth work. And I've studied these. They don't just stop and then they don't move backwards. And
yeah,
in some parts of the world, I think there are still very real miracles happening today, and people are seeing those miracles happen. I think particularly here in the States, you don't see those at the same level. There's certainly there's people getting healed, and it's like, I had this cancer and I don't have this cancer. I'm like, that totally happens. But I think it's difficult for a lot of people to wrap their heads around the fact that it's such a foreign concept to be like, this is entirely unexplainable, and that's okay, and doesn't make it any less true.
I think it was C.S. Lewis. He even has in his book Miracles, he talks, it's kind of a word for word response, and I don't even have to get into that, but he addresses what you're saying too. And the interesting thing that God tends to work through the systems he's made, but in an expedited manner. Like, it's just interesting. But the point, what I was going to say about him is what I think is interesting and what's important is that we have lost, and the way he says it is not to say that miracles are magic, but that we have lost a sense of magic. And like you said, we're not willing, and you're right. I think that other places that faith is proportionate with how God works. And you see that throughout. But it's funny that the only things you have to have faith about are money and getting, it really just, it tends to just all revolve around money and my comfort. And that's what our miracles are. It's like, God gave us some money, and that's great. But when you talk about, you're right, when you hear about the mission field, you see, or if we, why do we need miracles from demonic oppression? And I'm about as far from a Pentecostal as you can get. So just hear when I say this. But how often do we genuinely believe God will heal maladies of the mind, or that they could be spiritual, when we can just drug somebody? And I think, our faith tends to be more in drugs and science that we still don't do a very good job of explaining. So I'm with you. I think one of the best books, I don't know if I've ever told you about it. It's hard to use your finger on the camera. That book right there, there's that green one. It's called Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes. And one of my best friends told me about it years ago, and they loved it. But there's more. The guy that wrote it recently, he passed away about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. And his name's Kenneth Bailey. And so this is getting to what you're saying, though, I think that we not only do we miss some of the miracle, and I don't think, I don't use the King James, and I have reasons for that, but you find people that will say it's King just today in 2026, they're still King James only people. But I don't say what?
I know people who are in that camp.
It's tough. And so it's hard life for them. But I don't think that I think you can read a King James Bible and hear from God. Do I think that because we miss a lot of the things in Western history, and I would say the same logic, we read a lot of things and we don't understand the culture. And so maybe we miss the meaning, but more than anything, I don't think we get the richness of it if we don't understand it better. And so Kenneth Bailey is one of the guys. There's been a lot more of them that have come out that understand Arabic culture, and they understand Middle Eastern culture because his parents were Christian missionaries, and he grew up all of his life in Israel. And so he has heard, and the idea is that a lot of stuff has not changed in 2,000 years as far as, customs and views. And so anyway, to your point, I even think the idea beyond miracles, I preach, one of my favorite D-nows to get to preach is one that we call even if, and the idea is just even if, because Jesus is never, maybe he eventually becomes this, but Jesus is not the God you want. But he's the God you need. And he has never been the savior that we wanted. In fact, and we always talk about this around Christmas time. Christmas is a dark season. And it's not just that it's like, oh yeah, some of us have family problems at Christmas. Christmas celebrates the darkest, most visceral evil that the world has ever seen. Herod slaughtered an entire town of toddlers to try and keep salvation from coming to this earth. And John tells us when it comes that he says that the darkness tried to overcome the light, and yet it can't because the light came. And so there is a heaviness at Christmas, if you know Christ, to know that you're celebrating not only the joy and the hope that comes, but the absolute abject darkness and brokenness that it came to. And so when, understanding a lot of those things like Jesus, who Jesus is and how Jesus works, there's a lot of stuff with Bradley, but one of the things that I think is so beautiful is that he preaches, or he writes in this book, and I built based a D now off of it, but the passage was Zacchaeus. We all know Zacchaeus, and every church I've ever been to, and I've taught this is, Zacchaeus was they can all sing was a wee little man from stage, and we all know it. What's interesting is because your chapter and verse divisions are not inspired by God, they are put there. A guy named Stephen Langton put him there, and the myth is he did it on horseback on the way to the printer. The reality is he did it in a carriage. They think when he was driving, he just marked. Nothing wrong with that. Just a way to split it up. So sometimes it seems like it makes a lot of sense, and sometimes it doesn't. But we read the moment when Jesus encounters a guy named Bartimaeus, and then we read Zacchaeus, and they're separate, and we think they're separate, but the truth is they're part of one unified story. And I won't even tell the whole story. I just think what's important that you said, not just in miracles, but at one point, if Jesus doesn't sometimes bother you, like if he doesn't sound rude, if he doesn't sound kind of like a jerk, or if he doesn't sound cryptic, I don't think you're reading him well. And I struggle with that because I just accept a lot of things that he said and go, well, Jesus said it must be okay. I think he's big enough that he doesn't want you to do that. He wants you to wrestle with it. And one of the things that he does is after when he goes into this town and Bartimaeus, which means son of filth. So it's just a terrible name that you name your kid, but just,
That is bad.
yeah, but it's one of two times in scripture. Everybody else was saying Jesus of Nazareth is coming. The son of filth called him the son of David. It's the second time in all of scripture. So it's interesting that the son of filth calls out to the son of David. And that's his divine title. And so Jesus stops him and he has him come to him. And in just the very short explanation of it is that he's blind and has been blind all of his life. And he has a really good place in society, relatively. People were supposed to give to him. They needed to give to him. And when they'd give to him, he would scream out in the streets like, oh, Georgia Patterson, wealthy and wise and generous. Like he would holler out about alms and they got it. But he had no skills. He had no ability. He had nothing. That he just could sit and beg and talk. And that was it. And so you can imagine getting your sight at that point in life was not only incredibly hard, it had a lot of challenges with it, even if you wanted it. But Jesus bends down and Jesus doesn't heal him. He goes, what can I do for you? And I just think that sounds really, really rude and really like,
like he's blind.
Kind of terse. Like, it's just like, what, what are you like, is it like, what can I do for you, big fella? Like, what are you asking him that? But I think again, you read it and Bartimaeus, like Eve with the serpent, Bartimaeus doesn't skip a beat. He says, Lord, I want to see. And what's so beautiful about this passage is I have to know that even if I don't understand the context, that should strike me as odd based on what we know about our world today, but it should also let me know that something else is going on there because nobody responds to it the way that I would.
Nobody goes, dude.
I know. Like we were telling him to shut up.
I feel like, the way it's written, that someone would have written, whoever was scribing the book would have been like, and this disciple said, dude, that's harsh.
Luke would have been, and Jesus was a little bit tough. No, but what's cool about it and so what I think that we can absolutely see theologically that Jesus is showing when he heals them that he has dominion over those things, that he can bring healing and all of those things. But what the nuance that I think we miss that makes it so much more powerful to see is that when Jesus asks him that, the question isn't, do you want me to do this? The question is, are you sure? Because if I do this, you will have to relearn everything. You will no longer be able to beg. You will have to have, you'll have to learn how to live and create money. And you're already old. Like, this is going to cost you everything if I do this for you. And I get kind of teary eyed when I preach it because I see this moment with Bartimaeus where Jesus says, what do you want me to do for you? And Bartimaeus just says, I want to see. Just let me see. And he heals him and he says, your faith has made you well. And in that moment, there's a question to the reader and the question to those that would read it. How many of us in our lives, maybe so many people, and I mean, I've seen 50 or 60 kids surrender their lives to Christ in one moment because of the power of this passage. When you say, how many of you are groping around in the dark, pretending that you can see because you have wanted from Jesus? And when he said, what can I do for you? You said, make me popular, make me better, make my life easier, provide for me. But you didn't say, I want to see. And in this general core and all of this is that grace is free to take, but it costs you everything to receive. And so that in that moment, there's the crowd is this kind of, you wish that there was redemption in the crowd because they go from not liking and attacking the blind guy to hating that Jesus restores Zacchaeus. And, but in that moment, it's just such a beautiful place, but we miss all of that. Or, the fact that Mary and Martha and her cleaning had nothing to do with listening and serving.
Right.
It was all about the value of women in a world that did not value them. And it was an embarrassment in that home for a woman to sit at the feet of a rabbi. And so Martha doesn't come in because she wants help preparing dinner. She goes, Jesus, just get Mary Magdalene, or not Mary Magdalene, sorry, just get Mary out of here. Sitting here, it's going to be awkward, and you're just going to bring dishonor on my house. And Jesus does. And so how many people have been like, I'm not going to serve because I just need to sit at the feet of the master. Well, that's not the point of it. You should be
You're
serving.
missing the point of the
Yeah.
story.
Tire yourself out on it. The beauty of it was that was the moment where every person that tells you that Christianity and Christ are oppressive to women, that's one of the many moments that you can say, absolutely not, because Jesus said, Martha, you should be here too. And I think, and so anyway, we just miss a lot of stuff. So you should get Jesus through Middle Eastern Eyes. You'd love it.
Right.
One lady, I told a lady about it at a church I served at once, and it is a little bit academic for the first parts of each chapter that he explains, because he's showing you like structure and sentence and all that. But after that, it's pretty easy. And the woman that I gave it to, she was an old lady. She was so funny. She went, I took that book and I read it. I didn't know you had to have a PhD to read it. I said, just go like 2 pages in. Just 2. I promise it gets easier, but it's great.
Well, and I think in addition to just the miracles, and I know I'm certainly guilty of this, and I have to remind myself of it, go look at the stars sometimes. But in addition to just not really being able to grasp miracles, there's a distinct lack of wonder. There's a distinct lack of awe, and just like, this is amazing. Like, we use that term very loosely, very casually.
It's
in
kind
all
of
kinds
a
of
selective
situations.
sense of awe, isn't it? It's kind of a selective sense. We'll awe about the things that don't actually affect us, but we won't awe about the things that drive you to change.
And I think as believers, we should be in awe at a minimum of like what Christ has done for us regularly. Absolutely. And then looking back and being like, the way he's orchestrated my life is just, wow. Like, it's so much different than I would have expected. And it's so much better than I would have expected. And he's been working in so many ways. And so I guess the question is then, what do we do to get back to that, right? What do we do to get back to that sense of looking for the miracles and seeing the miracles and like being in awesome wonder, and then letting that impact how we live day in and day out?
I will tell you, I think a lot of it, from my perspective, because I'm the same way. I love, so I really like N.T. Wright. I don't agree with every theologian, and I don't know if I'm neither Reformed nor the opposite. And nobody has a good way of saying Arminian, because I'm not nobody's Arminian unless they're like legitimately wrong. But you're wrong on both sides of that at the extreme. And I'm in the middle of it. And I think that I love to read people and to be connected to people that have a high view of who Jesus is and who Scripture is. And so I try and I don't want to sit down. I mean, Joel Osteen is an extreme example that we'd all kind of laugh. Most believers, I would hope, would laugh at. They'd go, "Oh, I know." But even if all of the books, and all of the study, I think that there's a profound shift that if we would, N.T. Wright says that we need to learn afresh. And see afresh who Jesus is. He's said that for years and years. He'll just throw it in. But I think that for us, at least for me, is when your relationship with Christ is actually about Christ, that changes it. When we begin to focus on who he is, not what he is for me, and not what he does for, it's really deceptive how we can play that game. Everything rolls like that's even the fact that it doesn't matter when you talk politics, it doesn't matter if it's Trump or Biden. It doesn't matter if it's mortgage rates, or we have a very small, short memory, and we don't take any time to understand the length of it. And like when I see people, it doesn't matter if it's how terrible Trump is or how wonderful Trump is or how terrible Biden is. Like, people jump on this bandwagon of like, the sky's fallen and God, it's the worst time in Christian history. And I'm like, gee, I don't know if you understand that for the first 800 years of Christianity, they would be absolutely floored that you would get the choice to vote for somebody that you believed embodied at least a better treatment of the gospel than you, or than this person. Like, the fact that you actually get to do that. And then when you look at it, things just aren't that bad. And, it's pretty amazing that, I mean, we're in a more post-Christian season of our country, but we're not getting maimed and murdered and killed in the streets. I mean, it's just
And
to
there are
your
places in the world where they are.
yeah, oh, no doubt. So I just think there's to your point, at least the best I can say, and it's not the end all answer, but I think that the more that it's about Jesus and the less that it's about you, and not even like the real Jesus, not the esoteric. Like I think it's cool. I'm teaching. We're doing Revelation in our student ministry right now. We have a
Everyone's
series
doing
that's
Revelation right now. My parents'
everybody is
church
right
is doing
now,
Revelation.
but
The church in
they're
Ohio we went to is doing
they're
Revelation.
not all doing
You're
it
doing
well.
Revelation.
We did 20 weeks on it 4 years ago, and we turned that into a 6-week student series, and we Fallout themed it. So it's all done like, because that's popular right now and it's just funny, but it's called It's the End of the World, then I Feel Fine.
That's
And
amazing.
so it's really great. I'll just send it to you. But I just think that even how we approach books, and there's just I hate the idea. I think deconstruction is a really stupid thing because
Mm,
it's yeah. And I don't even say that to irritate somebody who is deconstructing, but that is a that the name is not good, but the process, they're almost at the process that every believer is just supposed to be at, where you relearn and you restudy what you are supposed to know. Not, well, this does not, like the idea that you assume everything would be perfect at every point where you're learning, and the fact that you all of a sudden you never realized that just pastors and churches and people were just full of people and people. Like it's one of those things where, and
it's like you're realizing that broken people are in fact broken people, and you're
yeah.
surprised that broken people are broken people.
And then you just want to take your ball and go home. And that's why I kind of say that I don't think church hurt really exists. And I heard somebody
Ooh,
else
you're
say
gonna
this
make
one
people
point.
mad saying stuff like that, Ian.
I know. I guarantee you, I'll be the least listened to episode you have. But no, the truth is, I don't believe church hurt exists. The same reason that I don't believe baseball hurt exists. When people get into or dance mom hurt exists, like I think that hurt happens, and I think that people hurt. But the funny thing is, I don't hear a lot of people saying that their kid doesn't play sports anymore because they had sports hurt. I don't remember people that have, wrecks in their cars. They don't, or they have a wreck or somebody road rashes them. They don't stop driving because they had road hurt. Like the point is just, we pick that because I think that that's something that I think that if I were to guess, my favorite book in the Bible is Jonah. I don't know if I've ever told you that. I just think
Oh,
it's
you and me
wonderful.
both.
I love Jonah,
I love
but
Jonah.
I believe that so much of America is in Jonah 1, where American believers, whatever, however we want to say it, if they do know Jesus, they don't. But Jonah's whole intent in running was not to get away from the mission of God. It was because the place that you heard from God was the temple, and he just wanted to get away from the place that he heard from God because it was asking him to do something he didn't want to do. And I think that at its very core, and I don't listen, there's even plans to write books and to get books published about things that I've walked through and how we can do better. But I guarantee you, not because I think that it's just I'm some special case, but I guarantee you, whatever church hurt has hurt you, I'll have a story that's worse, and then both of us will feel bad. Like it's like that's not gonna. My point is that I don't get the choice to walk away from Jesus because somebody else that Jesus saved was as broken as I was. It absolutely is terrible and heart-wrenching. But at the end of the day, I think that this idea of deconstruction is more what, when we had mature believers raising mature believers, is part of saying, yeah, I just got to relearn some of that. Or I have to really work out my faith with fear and trembling. And
And
I don't
that's
know how,
okay.
yeah, well, it's what you're supposed to do, right?
It's okay to go, I don't really understand this, and I don't fully understand how these things are reconciled, and I don't really know what scripture says about fill in the blank topic. I've just always been told this and believed this,
Yeah.
so I'm going to go research. I'm going to go study it until I can come to a conclusion and say, this is what I hold to be true and why I hold it to be true. And that gets into the
Yeah.
ready defense, right? We're called to have a defense. To have a
Mhm.
defense, you have to prepare a defense. Defenses are not automatic.
Well, yeah, and it's even the what you're quoting in Ephesians 4, having an apology, an apologetic or apologia or whatever the word is, like there's even more of a lifestyle focus on that too. That are you living in such a way that it proves? And I just think it's really featherweight mentality for us to say, well, because something was, because we don't do that with anything else. But I think that that's
Yeah.
because other things are not sacred. And so we worship other things. And I'm not even,
Other things don't convict you and shake the foundation of your identity in the same way.
They entertain you. And that's and so many churches that exist and run, entertain. And I just think that so much of shifting that back, shifting back towards seeing, like, I get it. Like when I read Revelation, so like most, I don't know how the churches you've encountered have done this, but most churches don't teach it well. And and it sounds, maybe it sounds a little bit snotty, and I'm not even saying we teach it the best, but the goal for us to teach it is that we teach what you can believe, not what you have to believe. And that's a real different prospect. Like, I want you to leave wondering, are you a dispensationalist? I'm going to say, I hope not. But are you dispensationalist, or are you an amillennialist? Are you a preterist? Are you a futurist? Like, what do you really think about it? And to know, maybe with the exception of hardcore preterism and all those, most of those fall within orthodoxy. And it does shape a lot of how you view a lot of things. If you don't believe in a tribulation and you don't believe in a rapture, then you kind of, that changes a little bit about, I think it gives you probably a little bit more longevity, and it lets you think through, like, yeah, the church has gone through this, we're going through it, and God's going to come back when he wants to come back. But when he does, it's a lot different. And that's a big oversimplification. But what I think is so interesting is the first session, we did the first one last night for students. The first session is, what's the point of it? And you even look at the things you have to relearn, is that the point of it, the point of Revelation is, and even the word apocalyptic, which is apokaluo, and I'd say that's been a while since I did Koine Greek, but apokaluo is I am revealing. It just means to reveal. And so we look at it like apocalypse or an apocalyptic literature is mysterious. But we forget the same rule that we study all of the New Testament by, is that any mystery is a mystery that's been revealed. When Paul speaks of the great mystery in Ephesians, he's talking about Jesus, who was a mystery, and now he's been revealed. And so the whole point of Revelation is not even to give you the details, it's to give you the end result and to strengthen you as you move forward. But we've turned it into such a, is it numerology? Can I predict it? Oh, look at the paper. You see, there's somebody invaded somebody. Like, there's just all these different things. That's like, they've been doing it for 2,000 years. We've been in the last days. And it doesn't, and we've kind of failed to understand, like, the point of it is Jesus is saying, hey, like, even the letters to the churches, that's the only place most people talk about is the letters to the church. But even in the letters to the churches, Jesus is the focus. And so Jesus is walking between his lampstands. And what God is reminding of his people through John is, hey, I'm present and I'm here, and it's really hard, but I'm walking amongst you. I haven't left you. And then I think it's amazing. I think we just do. You can't say people can't get tattoos. I don't even have tattoos. I'm just saying, you can't say people can't get tattoos. When Jesus comes flying out on a horse with a sword and a blood red robe and a tattoo on his thigh that says King of Kings, Lord. Like, I'm just sitting there going, I don't know. That's my Jesus. I think that's amazing. I think, why do we have so many pictures of him dying? Why don't we have more pictures of him flying on a horse?
Can we have more pictures of him coming back and less pictures of him dying?
Yeah. Why can't we? You should talk to a Catholic church on that. Seems like he died and never did anything. But when you do, like, I want more empty tomb pictures. And I want more pictures of Jesus just settling the score and conquering the world. Like, I love it. And so, but like all of Revelation, it's both a comforting and a really, really crappy letter at the same time, to say, do you know how God shows his power? Wow. He shows it through our suffering. And then one day he's going to come and he's going to put it all to rights. And it's like, but we sensationalize that to the point that as we're kind of looping around some of that there is so much awe in seeing God work. And I just think we miss the deep stuff, because I don't think we want to see it, and we don't spend the time in it. And if we would just spend the time maybe checking out a free commentary, or maybe, just kind of sitting in it. Wayne Grudem, who wrote one of the systematic theologies, probably the most popular one right now in the evangelical world. Grudem, he did a whole, you can listen to his lectures for free online. And he just was talking about scripture. And he said, a lot of you in the seminary class, he said, a lot of you preach commentaries. And he said, you read it and then you regurgitate it. And he said, I am all for study, but I think before you go to commentaries, you should have enough time that you have soaked and stewed in the word before you even learn anything about it. He said, let the Spirit not, and his whole goal is make sure that you're guided correctly as you go through it, but just soak in it for a little while. And I think that that's what we miss a lot of, is just genuinely wondering about scripture. And we've kind of, I think it's funny, we've stopped asking questions. And, A.W. Tozer says so well, the most important fact about a man is not whatever he may say and do at a given time. It's not his actions, but it's who he believes God to be in his heart. And that really is when we have figured God out and we've deconstructed him to the point that we don't need to ask questions anymore. It's not really, that's a small God. But if you keep coming back, I think that makes a difference. That's a lot of me
Well,
talking. I don't, but
and it's so easy to, we don't wrestle with ideas anymore, whether
yeah,
that's biblical ideas or just theological, like just ideas, right?
yeah,
Because it's so easy whenever you're even having a discussion with somebody and you're like, here's this idea that we might not fully understand.
mm,
We don't sit there and wrestle with it as two people and we say, well, what about this? And what about this? Let me use my brain and puzzle through what I know and what I've heard and my experiences. We just Google it. Or if
mm-hmm.
you're Gen Z, you open AI it, but that's neither here nor there.
As somebody that uses AI all the time too, I even think that we are so what's the word? I guess just accustomed to having things delivered to us, but you're right, not ever thinking anything through. And so I did like an AI and ministry workshop for somebody, like a guy asked me, that's what he wanted to do. And so I said, yeah, sure. And so I did it for him and we walked through it because we use a lot. We do cohorts with student pastors and teach them how to do it. So there's just a lot of that stuff. But it made me laugh because I just said, here's my question. I said, I hear the question all the time. How how in the world can we trust this to preach sermons and are we writing sermons? Are we doing all this stuff? And we're just doing what it tells us. And I said, and that's a fair question, but it's only a fair question if you ask the one before it. And nobody seems bothered that their pastor just regurgitates commentary and they just regurgitate what they heard. I've done that for years. Like we just read it and we go, and my other thought is, AI is just a machine that's pulling, and it's very useful for pulling research and doing stuff. You always have to check. But our whole point was it's a tool. It's just a tool, and it will either amplify what is worst in you or amplify what is best in you. Like it's just like anything else. But it makes me, to your point, it makes me laugh that even pastors, the idea that there's an easy answer, and I think that I think Gen Z is just as good and bad as any other generation. It's always just figuring out what you're good and you're bad. And I think one of the good things about that world is maybe I'm wrong on this, but it seemed the people that I have real conversations with, they not only do they want a substantial answer, but they're willing to talk about it a lot more and engage because they want a deeper answer. And I think at least as far as Christ is concerned and as far as the church, we have spent decades and decades with easy answers for a long, like we just take it and
I feel
accept.
like we've spent a very long time simplifying
Yeah.
and just saying, here's the
Yeah.
answer. It's cut and dry, it's clean, it's all nice. And quite frankly, scripture is not cut and dry. It's not all nice. It's
Yeah.
not all pretty. It's not all easy answers and it doesn't all make sense and you can't explain all of it. But we don't, it's hard to sit there and wrestle with an idea. It's
Yeah.
hard to sit there and go, I don't understand this. And I'm going to sit here and mentally puzzle through it until I understand it. And
Yeah.
I'm reading a book right now and it's about doing hard things. Just do the hard thing.
Is it
And
called
it's,
Do Hard Things?
yeah, it's called Do Hard
Yeah, I
Things.
know that book. That's
It's a
good.
great
Yeah.
book. I got it for Christmas. I'm so excited. But the premise of it is if you want to be a good leader, you do the hard things, right? Like
Right.
that's what you do. But we don't do hard things because we live in a society that's abundantly blessed and we just,
Yeah.
you don't have to do hard things for the
Right.
vast majority of your days. There are certainly people who are doing hard things, but that's one of those things where you go, I'll just Google it. And someone has said this is the answer. So that's what I'll roll with because they have these credentials or they've been doing it for 30 years or 40 years. And it's especially hard, I think, when you're trying to study scripture,
Yeah.
especially if you're trying to do it in any kind of teaching context whatsoever, because you go, well, this person has studied it as a career and this person has been teaching it as a career. So clearly they know more than me and they've said it so well. Why do I need to say it differently? And it's just kind of a natural, like I can regurgitate this because I think it's good and it's not intentionally trying to be the easy way out, but I think it's just the natural byproduct is it is the easy way out, even if you're not intentionally trying to avoid doing the hard thing.
It's crazy too, because there's this as a pastor, like one of the things that we do in our church is that and they know this, but we tell them, don't ever take what we say as gospel truth. And I mean, I told you this when you were a college student. You don't need to, you can hear me as an authority in your life because you're in my church, I'm your pastor, but you don't need to accept what I say, and you need to challenge it. If you, like, Paul loved the Bereans because he would teach, and like, if Paul is probably going to be the standard outside of Jesus as far as being right more often, because he's just more trained and he understands more and more brilliant. And yet Paul loves the Bereans because they listen to him and they go, hold on, we looked at all this and we've been reading and studying, and here's what we got. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think that maybe as a more insecure and a younger pastor than I have been, I used to look at that as threatening. I looked at it for a little while, not long, but for a little while as threatening. And I would just go, well, I mean, because I was afraid it might be wrong. At the same time, the longer you do it and the better it is, you start to really enjoy that, because you know that that they're wrestling with whatever the text is and what you've taught. And I think that's the hard thing about doing the right thing is not always and rarely is the easy thing, and it's rarely going to be the popular thing. And I think that's why, I could pick on them all day long, but there are just some really bad pastors that everybody loves, and several of them are in my hometown, and but all over the place. And what they do is they entertain, and they don't teach you. At the end of the day, it has nothing to do with Jesus, and it's 100% how do you succeed by using Jesus to succeed. It's a very different thing to worship Jesus than it is to see what you can get out of Jesus. And I don't know, we just see a lot of that. And I think you're 100% right. It's just this, I don't know. I wish that we have a really diverse, it's a small church. It's a church plant that's about 5 years old, 6 years old now. So I guess it's a church toddler or something. So it's not quite a plant anymore, but we just have a really diverse room of people that, they can be just on totally opposite ends of the political spectrum. Some of them struggling with what they believe, what they know, largely because if you're teaching the text faithfully over time, then at one point you're going to have conversations with each other. But it's interesting that Jesus had more people that would have opposed him and been challenged by him that wanted to be around him than not. And so that's just, I don't know. I think that there's something, also, Jesus was a really bad church growth guy. I mean, if you really think about it, and it kind of shows you God's heart too. I think growth is, I've been mega church, I've been church plant, I've been everywhere doing all of it. And I love to see large groups of people. There's a lot of energy when you go and preach to 500 kids as there is when you go and preach to 50. But the truth is that doesn't determine the value. And I've been shocked at what God does in small rooms more than what he does in big rooms. And it's just an interesting thing that Jesus picks 12. He sends out 120 at one point. And then when he has thousands and thousands, upwards of 20,000 people to see him, 5,000 men, he goes, yeah, go home. I don't need this. And then his whole church, when it gets hard, runs away from him. And they just let him be slaughtered. And though that is Jesus's his need, and it was necessitated that he would do that, it's still, I absolutely think every single person matters. I think every student matters. I think every church member, I think that every person matters to God. That's why he died for every person, so they could know him. At the other side of it, the number of persons you have does not directly linked to the value of what you do and what you invest. It just can't be. And whatever that story, there's even some crazy stories about how there's a whole, do you remember, this is make me really old. Do you remember Paul Harvey?
I feel like I should, but I don't think
Paul
I
Harvey
do.
Jr., I think, is still doing his dad's show. Paul Harvey was long before I was born, but when I was a kid, I'd listen in the car with my dad. And
That's probably why I've heard the name. You've probably mentioned him at some point.
probably, but Paul Harvey used to do this thing that was called, and they do it now on social media. It's just a trend, but it's essentially it's just burying the lead. But he would do he'd tell a whole story, and then he'd go, and it was called he had this real interesting voice, but he'd go, it's the rest of the story. And so he would tell you everything but the crucial information at the beginning. and then he would reveal who it was. And so it was all just a bury the lead kind of story. But I don't know if this was a Paul Harvey, but pastors do this a lot too. And I'll do it when I teach because it's just compelling. But it's a crazy story that there was I can't, Mordecai Ham, I think is his name, but he was a early 1900s evangelist. And so he would do big tent revivals, not the snake handling ones, but legit revivals in the revival era. And he would just go and preach. And it was just funny that thousands of people would come. And these two boys showed up who had nothing to do with Jesus. They just came. And there was one seat left that they could see. And one of the ushers came over and helped move some people around and got two. So they didn't leave. They both came and stayed. And they gave their lives to Christ. It turns out that those two boys were Billy Graham and Billy Graham's business associate, who set everything up for him and set up most of his stuff for most of his time preaching. But nobody knows who the usher was. Billy Graham didn't even know. But that usher has more value, not because of the number of people he could have seated, but because he was faithful to seat the number of people that God gave him. And I think that's that moment where I don't ever want to negate that God absolutely cares about the numbers. He tells us how many at Pentecost and how many in Jonah and how many all over. But at the same time, your value is already secure. It's a matter of living out of your value no matter what happens. And that's the thing. It's kind of the princess effect, where so many girls and the young ladies in this generation say, I'm a princess and I need to be treated like a queen. and the response is going to be, well, do you act like a queen? Because if you don't act like a princess or a queen, you don't deserve it. And I think that there's this idea that we believers have this really beautiful opportunity that we get to live out of who we are already. We don't have to earn who we are. And so I think that alone should be awe-inspiring for people. I think you on our leadership team a long time ago went through Search for Significance, and that's such a beautiful truth of that is you live from approval and from value, not for it. And so I like that we can rabbit trail over all this stuff because it all connects, but we don't get to do this. Is I think how Christian community probably should be. We should be able to sit and enjoy talking about this, but all of us, I think the reason most people don't sit down and work through ideas is because we are taught on some level, and just because you're taught it doesn't mean you have an excuse. So that's always my thing. But we are taught, I think, that we have to be productive. No matter, I mean, and I could be wrong. We're spitballing half of this stuff, so I have not wrestled with this. But I would say that I think that be productive falls in almost every category, even in the fact that we binge series and we have to binge and get through it. We have to consume it all because that's just because we feel like we did something.
Well, we're taught to be productive, and
Yeah.
we're taught that questioning means you don't believe. You're not on board.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's even a historical thing. That doesn't even have to be unique to a generation or a culture. Like great faith, I think, comes with great doubt. It's just a matter of C.S. Lewis said it, right? I'll quote C.S. Lewis all day long if I have enough quotes.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah, but he said I believe in Christianity like I believe in the sun, not because I see it, but because by it I see all things. And that's that idea. I don't, as a believer, I'm a believer and a dad and a husband long before I'm a pastor. And even as a believer in any of those things, I work from a place of I have great doubt in areas that I learn from, but I don't approach those areas in my life as if they are only true if they're proven. I approach them as they will be true. I just need to take enough time looking at them. And it's really interesting because we make a lot of assumptions about a lot of things. And I think that it's really, maybe it was Chuck Colson who wrote the book, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. It's one of those really well played, almost, it's a cliche now because he said it. That's kind of how you think about it. But I think that that's true. But I think it's interesting that we don't, it really is not nearly the leap of faith people think to approach. You're always going to approach something as if with a bias of if it is true or not. I don't think that it's a bias in a negative way that I can go, man, I can look at the tomes and tomes of things written and the academic integrity of what God's word is. So maybe it's okay. I think there's just a lot of fear. Hannah and I talked about this just in any part of your life the other day. Um, Hannah's my wife, to anybody that's listening. I actually also didn't know we were recording until about 30 minutes in. So I may have said a lot of things that we're not good to say. I don't know. But this idea is that I think there is never a good decision that is made out of fear. And we know that perfect love casts out fear. And so whether you're a parent, whether you're in a relationship, whether you're whatever, making decisions out of fear are not sound decisions. It doesn't mean that they don't work out sometimes. It doesn't mean that you can't make up for it. But like that's where I think we are a lot of times, is that we're so afraid that what if somebody proves this wrong, or what if I find out that it's wrong? I don't even want to look at it. And I just, my encouragement would be to people that God's just bigger than that. And God, and the sad thing is, I mean, you worship something, probably a lot of things in the pantheon of your life. And I think that misplacing who sits, I think your fear can do a lot to tell you who sits on what throne. I like certain presidents and I don't like certain presidents. I like certain politicians and I don't. But it is not, whoever wins does not determine the quality and value of my life. And it can't. But that's where we live. Well, if this guy I think there's a lot of good things that can happen in a country, or a lot of bad things that can happen. And I don't think anybody's just doing all the right things or all the wrong things. But at the end of the day, as believers, I mean, it's almost become an industry for the evangelical American church to like, we infight so much. And that book, Bad Therapy, it made me kind of sad when I read it, to think, the one exception in here should be, but 80% of evangelical Christians have reported that they're doing better. And I'm like, I need that in there, but it's not in there. And because I think a lot of us just, what we're afraid of and what we fear is going to tend to be what we worship. And the sad thing is, we worship a lot of things that we can't control on any level,
Yeah.
on any rational level. And I don't understand it. Like, you can worship Donald Trump, or you can worship Joe Biden, or you can worship whoever the next guy is. But like, I don't have any connection to that guy at all. And I
Zero connection.
When God talks, I think it's Jeremiah, when God's speaking to Jeremiah, and he goes, you make an idol that you worship for things, but you made it out of wood, the same wood that you burn for fuel, and the same wood that you build. Like, you made your God, and you can't even control. And I think about the same thing. It's like, well, I think that a lot of us, me included, I think that there'll be maybe a lot of disappointment before I believe that there'll be a lot of ecstasy meeting Jesus, that we go, oh man, I spent a lot of time on that and I shouldn't have. And to the same degree, we talk about church hurt, and there's a lot of stuff that, there's a lot of stuff that I've been through, and a lot of stuff Hannah and I have been through together, and pastors' wives have a different way of getting hit than you do, even though, it's hard all around, sucks all around. And, but one thing that I heard that was so good, I don't even know if I'm not quite sure I would preach this, probably even shouldn't say it, just because I don't know. It's a more of a personal thing than it is a preachable thing. But there's been a couple of steps with how do you forgive somebody that doesn't think they need to be forgiven? And how do you, because that's hard. It's easy if somebody says, yeah, I was wrong. You're like, man, I get it, I forgive you. But there's a lot of people in my life that have absolutely torn me up, but they don't ever, and even if their lives are in a shambles now, and they've just proven it, that they're never going to think that anything wrong was the case. And then so you struggle with that idea. And I remember a few years ago, God really drug me through, the parable of so it was the first passage I ever preached, the parable of the unjust steward, or the wicked steward who, or no, not steward, the unjust servant. But I can't remember what English name we give it, but the parable where Peter asked, Jesus, how many times should I forgive somebody? And
Yeah.
Jesus, gives him all the math. And the point is, it's just, let me illustrate it to you in a story. And he says the one servant, like the figures are so ridiculous that, like, the amount that he owed him was 5 times what that entire Roman province would give in a year. So like it wasn't even like it was just set to make
Yeah.
people go, "Oh my gosh." And he forgives him. And then he goes back on the street and he finds somebody that owes him like 100 days wages for a regular worker, and he throws him in prison. But we all get that and we're like, "Oh yeah, that's good." But the other side of it is, there was something that I felt like God kind of hit me with, is that I think we always make that guy into a jerk that threw the guy in prison. I don't know if he was a jerk. What I do I don't know if he was doing that to be mean. I think the truth is, being forgiven by Jesus is so uncomfortable and so unsettling that that guy still did owe him a debt. It could have been that he was really just trying to get that money back from him so he could at least give 100 days wages back to the king, and then he could have had something to do with it. But there is something unsettling about grace that should be, that it is scandalous is a good word that's been used a lot. It's scandalous. It is costly. It's hard. And there was this moment where I just kind of realized, and then I was talking with one of my close friends, and the statement was, I hear the voices of these people in my head all the time, and the things they've said to me and the things they've said about me and my family. And I don't know what to do with that. And I felt a lot like the wicked servant, because I just don't know. I want those guys to pay. And I want them to pay, maybe because it will validate me in some way to know that I wasn't wrong. And or that I wasn't completely wrong, because that's just how I was raised to feel most of the time. And so, but there was just this moment, I think, where Jesus said, "Hey, that guy, it doesn't have anything to do, it doesn't have to have anything to do that guy being a terrible person. I need you to identify him and to understand. Maybe you just haven't understood what grace for me is as fully." And somebody just said, I'm afraid that I'm going to get to Jesus, and he's going to say, "Hey, I love that you did all these things, but why did you let that guy's voice and that woman's voice but why did you let their voice be louder than mine? You wasted a lot of time on them. And they're really nothing. They're only something to me. They shouldn't have been anything to you." And I get in those moments, and you kind of, that did not cure the feelings, but that gave insight into them. And then even I haven't shared this with anybody, but a couple of weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, I was reading Isaiah while Hannah was sleeping, and we were getting ready to have Haddon. And I had this moment where I was reading. And so you kind of, what is the follow up to that? And again, it's messy and it's hard and it's not 100%. It's not a one, fix. We look for formulas. God looks for processes. And, I can neatly pin that up in a Western bow, right? He looks for processes. That seems, it's less messy.
We can make little stickers of that we can sell on Etsy.
That's right. But t-shirts only. But I got to this point when I had Elias. I got to think through a lot of things, like, what did I want to be as a parent, working through things I was struggling with growing up. And I even hate dealing with that as in my late 30s. It's like, you just need to be over it at this point. But I had him at that point, and I learned those things. And then it started a different approach for me. But with this boy, with Haddon coming, I was just reading in Isaiah and not even thinking about it. And I don't get emotional very often, but just because I just don't. But I got hit at this moment where you think about Isaiah and you think about the call that God has and how God speaks to his people. And there is just this God, God quotes himself, and he's the only person that's not unsettling. But he quotes Exodus, and he just says that I'm slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. But you need to tell these people that what they're doing is presuming on who I am. But I need you to know that we're going to, even in the punishment, we're going to restore you. Like, it's like everything that God does is out of love. And I just had this moment where I stopped, and it's all quiet, and I'm reading Isaiah 1, and I kind of wanted to go to 6, because I always go to 6 in Isaiah for a minute. And I just kind of heard this voice, clear as one of those few times it's clear as day, just said, "Hey," because I've just been rooted down in a lot of struggle for the last couple of years on how do I let go of this? How do I get over this? How can I function when I get so much value, I guess, too much value from people, but it just really hurts. After about 15 or 20 years of it, it just really, I get tired of getting kicked. And God had this thing where he said, "Hey, you know all the places that you're really awful, and you know the things, and you're trying to because you have to reconcile. I've done a lot of bad things to people. I was changed by a lot of toxic cultures, and I bear the full brunt, or bear the full ability for how I acted. But then these other people acted horrible too. So how do I reconcile that? And I just remember
Right.
God just goes, "Hey, if you were that broken, and I still blessed you with a son, when you know how big of a blessing that is." And it wasn't so often we hear a condescension from God. And I think that this was just a genuine loving, kind of how I think God acted with Jonah when Jonah's just such a jerk. And God just goes, should I not care for those people too? And I heard him say, it was just like he said, hey, I've blessed you with this amazing thing and you don't deserve it. Do you think you could give other people around you the thing they don't deserve too, no matter what the outcome is? And it's just one of those moments where, you get emotional about it, and then it's hard work after, but it has profoundly, at least for the last month and a half, has been another shift and step in me personally, to where you can just say, yeah, it clarifies a lot of things, because we get so stuck in, and I don't know how I need forgiveness, and I did a lot of bad things, but man, I had some bad things done to me. And I think there's that resounding statement with God, and you look at his people and you look at him through the New Testament, and it's like, hey, you are really bad, but I still love you. So do you think you could do the same thing for them? And so for as long as what we're talking about, I know that rabbit hole and shifts, but that's been a lot on my mind, heavily on my mind, the last several weeks, despite a lot of work we're getting done and a lot of things we're doing and all that. It's a good thing that I think it's a good thing to be vexed. It's a good thing to struggle. It's a good thing to let, it's a good thing to be uncomfortable. I think that God works in when we're most uncomfortable. So
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I always heard, nothing will grow you like marriage, and then nothing will grow you like kids. And everyone's like, no, like I'm good. And then you get married, and it's been amazing to me how much, like, a deeper level of things that I have struggled with, right? There's been identity things that I've struggled with. There's been, am I enough questions that I've struggled with for years and years and years. And like, why don't people choose me? Like, I never really dated people and all of these things. And I spent years studying, like, who does God say I am? Who am I in that? And like living and saying, okay, I know who I am. I know I'm valued in his sight. I know I'm loved in his sight. Like, that's where the value lies. I'm
yeah,
I won't say I've got it all figured out, but I got to a point where I was like, this isn't really the daily struggle it has been before. Like, we're past the daily struggling of it, and like we're moving into other things. And then I got married, and it was like, woof. Like, let's just address all of that again at a
whole other
deeper
level.
level. And I
And
was like, oh,
it gets
okay,
worse
we'll
and better at times. Yeah,
do this again. Because
I
it's just,
think.
it's such a different depth to the same lesson, and God being like, there's still more for you to learn in this. There's still, sanctification and grace that's happening in this. So you can give people the same grace and sanctification when they're still dealing with the same thing over and over and over and over again, because you are too, just in different ways.
And it's always a different moment. You're right. And with kids, it's funny because, and I think that even with finding somebody that the give, quote unquote, the gift of singleness, what so many people call it, it's a rarer thing than it is, just statistically. But to your point, so many people and students or young people are getting married, whatever it looks like. There's this idea that I think the idea of being in love is fine, and that's important. And I think that that's a feeling. And there's this whole point. I think this change, one of the biggest changes when you get married, is that, because year one is Hannah and I laugh about this all the time, because we watch, I tease about watching trashy TV. We don't watch a lot of trashy TV, but the things we do watch together are usually like Love is Blind, Married at First Sight, and The Circle. I just think that they're fun to watch. But I appreciate Love is Blind, and uh I don't enjoy those shows for what they are. I enjoy them for what they make you think about. And that is because there is this, you think about where most people are out with marriage, and even where they kind of end up a lot of times, is that we're talking about this idea that, you know, the feeling of love is different because deep, true love is love that is when you choose to love somebody and you choose to love them despite how they make you feel because it's not about you. And it's funny to watch it's a marriage when it's a healthy marriage. I'm not saying we should do Love is Blind. I think it's a terrible. But it's all, and you watch it, but I told Hannah, I said, what's so funny about it? What's so toxic about it is when you first get married for year one, it's one of the biggest fighting periods you have because you're trying to figure out how to live together and share life together, but you have sex to pad that. So like God has given a padding in there where like there's really intense joy, but then on the other side of it, there's really intense fighting, but you're learning and it kind of settles, right? And what I appreciate is that a lot of these people on those shows, I told Hannah, I said, like, one, TV is stressful. If you got people following you around the whole time, that's going to be
With a
weird.
camera, like,
Yeah, that's odd. But on the other side of it is most of these people, and to their credit, they don't sleep together while they're doing this stuff. A lot of them end up doing it, but most of the time they don't. And I said, what's funny is you've removed all of the fun new things that you should be able to do to release pressure, and you don't get to do any of that. But then on the other side of it, you're telling them, and you don't really have to be married, but you are married. But you're gonna do it, and there's this odd push. I think when you look at how biblically how marriage should be, it's much less about because even historically in the times that were written, marriage is not always something you chose. Like romantic love is it's a newer concept relatively, but this idea that I think it's beautiful that how does Jesus show his love for us? Romans 5:8, by choosing to love you when you didn't deserve it. And that he shows his love for you. And then you look at the fact that marital love is supposed to look like Christ in the church and a husband who gives himself for his wife. And so then year 3 is another bad year. And because it's just, I guess things are settling in. And then if you can get to 7 and get past 7, your odds of staying together from a world's perspective are like, it's like 80%. And I laughed with Hannah or I didn't laugh. It's kind of sad. I said, so many people, because it is about me. And if what you're doing is about fulfilling yourself, then what you're going to do and what most people do is that they get married, do all that intense fighting and anger, and then they divorce only to relive the worst years of your marriage. So as good as marriage is in the beginning and as good as it is, always the next year is supposed to be better because you've got more time. And I'll tell you at almost 11 years now with Hannah and I, so I got married a little bit late, I guess 25, which is later than what people used to get married at. But when I got married, at year 11, it's a lot. We learned so many more better things about ourselves at year 11 than we did in the first 5 or 6 or 7 years. And it's just a lot more fun. So you're 100% right. It's crazy how
I feel like the first couple years, and don't get me wrong, marriage is great. Ben is wonderful. It's so much fun. But I feel like it's a lot of learning where we both suck.
It really is.
Like it's a lot of going, man, I'm really bad at this. And him going, man, I really messed this up. And me going, man, I was really mean. And it's like, what do we do with that? How do we get better? And it's so much learning of, oh, this is where I'm not actually perfect, but I still love you. So at some point we have to figure out, how to reconcile these things and be together. And
I think learning. Too, I'll tell you the truth. It is because you're accepting partial responsibility for another person. So like it's not just about you anymore, even though it still is, but like now wives, you can sanctify your husbands and how you act, and husbands, you're supposed to love and die for your wives. And it's almost like, yeah, you do. You throw a whole nother can of gas onto the fire, and then you have kids. And I love having, I still think the greatest thing, I've told you this since you were in college, that I think people that just want to go find themselves are like, I need 10 years of career, men or women, but I need 10 years of career. I really got to work on this, bro. You need to, if you didn't get everything you needed in college, traveling around then it's just, you're not going to find it any other time. Like you need to find somebody that you can love. You need to get married. You need to have kids. You need to enjoy it. Like, cause it's absolutely the best things you will ever be outside of a Christ follower are a spouse and a parent. And not everybody gets to, and I don't know, that can sound, if you're reading that from your perspective and you're just going, well, that was me. I'm not calling anybody out on it. You may not be able to have kids, but you can adopt them. You may not be able to have, like, there are so many different things there are caveats and exceptions to all that, but in general, that's God's design for for the world and for his people. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's cool that we live in a world where you can achieve those things, even if the broken and sinful side of the curse of sin has kept you in other ways. So it's like, I just look at people that they say, well, we can't have kids and we're really struggling. And I get that. I think that is a struggle. One of my best friends struggles with that. So they adopted, and they find deep joy in the kids that they've adopted, and they look for more. And then I just see so much of that. And there are people, I think God can absolutely use you single forever if that's how it needs to be. And I think that's fine. I do think that there is a beautiful thing that I think more marriages now, even Christian marriages, are two single people living together more than they are a marriage. And so it's very much about me, and you're figuring out how you can both be about yourself, but still be together. And like,
I
yeah,
genuinely do not understand people who are married who are totally fine just not being around their spouse for an extended period of time.
yeah.
I don't understand it. They're like, oh yeah, like I just need time away from them. And I'm like, what do you mean you need time away from them? Like,
The
that's
funny
the
thing
only
is,
person I ever want to talk to about anything. I don't need time away from him.
the funny thing is, you may understand where they're coming from in like 5 years, but
Possibly.
but my point, I think to your point, it's like, but when you're a year or two in, that is weird. And I even think it's weird when I see, I'm gonna just stand on my soapbox and be fine with this. But like, people have separate accounts with each other and they divvy up the expenses. It's a real, I don't think that any of those things are sinful necessarily, but I think that the end of those things they might be slippery slopes, that it's about, it's all about me and it's about my life and I'll contribute here and I'll contribute there, rather than just being one with each other. Like, that's the idea, is just to be one. And I don't know. I don't do it well. And Hannah doesn't do it well. Like, we struggle to do it just because we're people. But I think that I do think that it's hard to hit the bullseye in life, but it sure helps when you at least have your focus in the right direction. And that's what I think. Life, I think that even biblically, I could probably argue this, and that's all that matters, to argue it that way. But I think even biblically, you could say that perspective is probably 80 or 90% of success for us on a lot of things, just because the perspective that you have often says the goal that you're headed toward. And so if your perspective is, man, I genuinely want to, and it sounds, I don't know, it almost sounds bad, not bad to say it. It sounds like it's almost cheesy that people would say this, but the truth is, I was designed and created to worship Jesus and to worship God. And people might go, well, Ian, I do that once a week. So yes, I live to worship you, but you don't Monday through Saturday.
No.
And the thing that I struggle with is not showing up at church on Sunday. The thing I struggle with is making Jesus Lord Monday through Saturday.
Honestly, the Sunday's the easy part.
Yeah. And the sad thing is too, the whole point of Sunday is that you'd be convicted, you would rejoice, you'd be encouraged. There's a whole bipolar, well, not even bipolar, like quadpolar, whatever word, there's a whole gamut of things that the reason that the church gathers. But in Scripture, the church doesn't gather for self-help. And the problem is, that's kind of what we get. We have an impotent church because we've chosen to focus on impotent things. And it's like, I don't need to hear an hour. Like, I would not go to church very often either if as a believer, if I went and all I was going to hear was a self-help talk. Like, I can find that on YouTube. But the other side of it is just, if you're engaging in healthy community, you're engaging in Scripture the way that God's called you to be. Like, there should be some and there should be some, and like, there's a lot of emotions you can run through, and that's the beauty of it. But the nice thing is, I'm always I think topical stuff has its place. You got to do that from time to time. But I really believe that if you'll find a good church that exposits Scripture and is expository in nature, and they're just going verse by verse and chapter by chapter, that's going to be a much healthier place for you than the church that just most bad theology comes from a creative team of guys at a big church that went, I got this really cool idea. Why don't we try this? And like, I think we always used to laugh because we'd see bad church, like funny YouTube clips of bad things they say at church, I always think that was a creative meeting gone bad. So
That was this will be really great.
oh,
And then it
yeah,
went sideways.
because there's a whole side of pastors and church people that think, if it's got to be, we have to put a basketball or a roller coaster on stage, basketball court or roller coaster to make this point, or it's not going to be good. And then there's a whole other crowd of people on the opposite end that go, if it's not an hour and really boring and make you want to meet Jesus faster, then it's not Jesus. And I think that there's I love creativity and I love teaching things creatively and I love all that, but it's always about where it starts. And I don't know if I've ever had a good and lasting thing in life and ministry and that started because of a creative idea before it started because of a scripture idea. And it's just a different, I don't know. I've just thought of there's some really bad things. I can't even think, I think of several of them off the top of my head, but they're not great examples. I've just seen some stuff that I know some guy went, I've always, you look at Prestonwood's Christmas program, how do drummers flying through dressed as toy soldiers flying through a worship center, how is that honoring to Jesus? It just isn't. And you can tell me all day long that that's okay, but it's not. It's like you guys spent like millions on this whole set or hundreds of thousands of dollars on this service. And I just don't know if that started with, hey, how do we worship Jesus who came in obscurity? I know how. Let's do The Greatest Showman. That was a legit song in a Christmas program as they do Greatest Showman. It's so bad.
It's so bad.
And I mean, I grew up in a church. They don't do quite that much, but I grew up in a church in a time in the 90s that was big, big church stuff. And I don't know, everybody, I hope. So I think the hardest passage as a pastor to reconcile is Philippians 1. And it really does a lot to humble you, and it really does a lot to put things in perspective for you. But I think when Paul says, some people preach out of conceit, some people preach to hurt me, some people preach out of a good heart, and they want to see the ministry continue. But as it is, at least people are hearing the gospel, and that's that is the hardest as a pastor. I look at so much, and I have to realize that I'm broken too, and I'm messed up. It's a humbling thing, but it's also a hard thing because you're like, yeah, but what about Mike Todd, who is every bit a heretic? And what about these false teachers and these people? It drives me nuts. And my not even my hope, but my belief, there are false teachers for sure. But when you go down to places Preston was not a false teacher, but you look at those programs, you just go, I pray and I hope that at the end of it, when they share about who Jesus is, that people genuinely meet Jesus.
Yeah.
And so but I don't know. That's I've said that for a long time, that it's just really hard. And I think you got to be gut checked by that stuff, because I'm not the arbiter. I absolutely should call out false teaching, but I'm not the arbiter of bad ministry unless I'm in that ministry serving, and then I have to talk about it. But I don't know. It's crazy.
Well, always a pleasure chatting with you. I know, always a pleasure. We're gonna have to cut it off and have you on another time, because otherwise we'll just sit here and talk forever.
I know. I don't know if anybody listens to this. Hopefully you cut out anything that I said early on or later on that might be damning to me or others. But it is a lot of fun just talking. Thanks for having me.
It was great talking to you. If people wanted to learn more about you and what you're doing, where do they go? What do they do?
Yeah. You can go to G6. So just like Galatians 6, allies.com. And that's our overall organization. We're G6 Church as well. And so those are our mission to pastors. So our whole mission with whatever we do is to see pastors and their families be resilient and to be emotionally, spiritually resilient. Because here's the truth. No church, or very rarely, I always caution to say never, but no church really ever gets any healthier than the pastor that leads them. And so we want to see pastors be healthy, and that works out a couple of different ways. Clearly, logo on my chest or behind me is not G6, but shaping student ministry is one of the things that we built out of that. And because serving the needs of student pastors is different. And so to see students, so you can go to shapingstudentministry.com to see all of that. But we would love for you to give, to be a part of it, to support it, to pray for it. But all we do is we not only are in the trenches of ministry serving our people, but we're doing our best to be allies to pastors out there as well. So if Georgia's edited this well, then you'll believe that statement and not be too offended by me. If you did hear it all and you're still in, then you're our people. So jump in. But it's I'm really honored that you wanted to talk with me, and I appreciate it. It was great to be
I
here.
appreciate you coming on. It's been a good time. Thanks so much for listening, friends. I hope you enjoyed Ian and I's chat and learned something new this week. Huge thank you to Ian for coming on the show and spending some time discussing big topics. For now, let's keep the conversation going. Leave a comment on the video here or on YouTube with your thoughts and suggestions for who I should talk to next. Let me know if you agree or you disagree, or maybe you hold a different opinion. Share this episode with your friends so you can chat with them too, and we can broaden the conversation. Thank you for tuning in to another great chat. I can't wait to see what the next conversation brings. Until next week, let's talk about it.